Everyone following us in our social media page is going to be listening to this on Radio Nuku'alofa at 8.6 FM. Today I've got the pleasure to talk to our Speaker of Parliament, Lord Fafanua. Lord Fafanua, before we start, I'd like to thank you for always saying yes to our conversation. But before we start, I would like, if I can ask, if we can take off our mask.
That's okay.
Because we are beyond the 2-meter distance, social distance. Lord Fafanua, our interview today, or our conversation today, will be based on Parliament. My question, is it an unwritten rule that these nobles have to vote one way? And second to that, do you have any insight on why that there was a split in the nobles' vote last year for our Prime Minister?
I think the fact that the nobles actually split in the Prime Minister's election last year is probably testament to the quality of candidates that were on offer. They were both good candidates, and I think the convention of the nobles voting as a bloc was obviously split as a result.
My question for you, Lord Fafanua, is can you talk about the support and the rally behind our country, not just from our people, our Tongan people in New Zealand and overseas, but many other communities got together to rally, to support and help our country?
The amount of support that we received from all around the world, and to see firsthand Tongans unite in New Zealand, and also the other Pacific islands for our people, it was very heartwarming. And the fact that one of the committees organised the containers to be packed at Mount Smart was kind of reminiscent of Mate Matonga.
The Prime Minister has got some recent news of 3 of his cabinet ministers have been found guilty for bribery. A people's representative has been found guilty for bribery. That's 4 parliamentarians, Lord Fafanua, that's been found guilty for bribery. How does that affect Parliament?
Yeah, the fact that 3 of them are in cabinet affects Parliament in that our first agenda for this year is the government budget. And the Prime Minister has sent a letter to the Speaker and to Parliament requesting that we defer the scheduled sitting from 16th of May due to the fact that all of this is happening within the government. But the delay will allow government to refocus itself and present the budget as they were supposed to.
That deferral of Parliament, is the date set by you, the Speaker of Parliament, or is it set by the Prime Minister and Cabinet?
Well, actually, you have to remember that the work of Parliament foremostly is to pass legislation, and the budget is the most important legislation because we need to finance all of the work of government. And the only agenda we have right now in terms of legislation is the government budget. So if the government's not ready with their budget, then that will have an impact on when Parliament will sit to deliberate that legislation.
With the 4 parliamentarians, especially with their verdict coming out guilty, are they unseated, Lord Fafanua, automatically once the verdict is out, or do they wait for Parliament to sit and Parliament unseats them?
That's prescribed in the legislation under the Electoral Act. If a member of Parliament is found guilty of committing electoral bribery, then they will be unseated by Parliament.
By Parliament,
It actually says shall be unseated by the Legislative Assembly. That unseating will happen at the next sitting of Parliament. The only precedence we've had for that, the last precedence was in 2016 with Lavu Lavu, where the Supreme Court certified that his election was void on a Friday, and because Parliament was already sitting, he was unseated on the next sitting, which was the Monday after.
Does these 4 parliamentarians have to attend the Parliament to be unseated, or can they be unseated with those seats vacant?
They should be there.
Yeah.
And whether they come or not, I think is not the point. The point is that the Legislative Assembly needs to comply with the Electoral Act and go through with the unseating at the next sitting of the House.
I know the first sitting of Parliament is supposed to be the 16th of May, which is next Monday. How is this delay affect everything?
So by delaying the sitting of Parliament because the government's not ready with the budget, for those who are waiting to be unseated, they will have a chance to lodge their appeal and potentially ask for the Supreme Court to stay the ruling. No, to my knowledge, and back to 1990, cases like this have not been granted a stay by the court.
If any of these 4 parliamentarians appeal to the Court of Appeal the decision from the Supreme Court, and as you mentioned on your answer before, if this appeal is heard after you guys sit in Parliament for the unseating will continue?
We have to go through the unseating because the guilty verdict triggers the unseating. And the only thing that can undo that would be another Supreme Court. As a matter of due process, Parliament has to do with the unseating. And the delay right now could potentially allow those who are affected to go back to the courts. And the thing is, we're under the law, we have to submit the budget, and it has to be on our agenda before the end of the month, before the 30th. So the delay cannot be beyond that.
After, say, these parliamentarians are unseated, and then they appeal to the Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court decision is overturned, do they get their seat back?
If the seat is still vacant and their void election is overturned, they become legitimate members, then they will assume their seat. But if the appeal is heard and we get a judgment after a by-election, the seat will no longer be vacant for them to return to. And they will essentially become victims of the law.
Okay. I know that the punishment that all 4 of these parliamentarians got, it isn't just to void the election. They're also banned for running again for Parliament for 5 years.
They cannot run for Parliament for 5 years.
5 years, yeah.
Which basically stops them from returning over the next election, so there will be 2 terms out of Parliament.
Lord Fafanu, I asked you before about if the Supreme Court decision is overturned and their appeal to the Court of Appeal is successful, but if it's been heard after the by-election, then they become a victim to the law. Would this mean that the 5-year ban will be taken off them and they're eligible to run for the next election?
Yes. Yes, it will no longer apply.
Okay. With these cases, and I know it's going to happen a lot, with every election, there's going to be a civil court case.
I'm quite optimistic, Lala, because I think that we're still in the early stages of our democracy, and this is part of the teething issue. My predecessor, Lord Lasike, when he lost his seat, even though that was a criminal case that he was acquitted of, those gaps in the law we filled so that if an appeal is heard from a criminal case and gets overturned, they can still return to their seat. But in terms of bribery during the election, we're now finding out that there are some things that we need to refine in terms of the timeline. And I believe that the reason why things have stretched out was because of the natural disaster on the 15th of January, followed by COVID, and that sort of impacted the schedule for these petitions to be heard. But I think ideally the Supreme Court in the future might hear these petitions after an election in November in January or February, meaning that the appeal could be heard by May, which is the first Court of Appeal. So given that Court of Appeal sits in May and around, I think, September, the current round of petitions have missed the May. And it would be up to the Lord Chief Justice to have a special session, but I can't speak to that. That's up to Chief Justice and the judges.
And I'm optimistic as well, Lord Fafanua. And what's happened now, the opinion that's come in from the people right now is to stay within the law of the Election Commission or within the rules of the Election Commission.
The law is really clear because it already states and gives you the boundary for, what is a bribery, what is legitimate campaign. There are limits to how much you can spend within the 6 months leading to the election. I think what these cases have done is clarified what the MP can do and what would give them reason to be petitioned. So I think it's good for future elections and also for future candidates. They'll be aware of where the limits are to what will be deemed illegal under the Electoral Act. And what is legitimate campaign spending.
Lord Fafanua, what you're saying is there's exemption within the Electoral Act that allows these candidates when it comes to gifting?
The exemption there is for family.
Okay.
So if the candidate is spending money on his family and their regular expenses, that's exempted. And also charitable organizations and churches. But I think we still need to be careful because if it's in the ordinary donation that he makes, then that should be exempted anyway. So some of that nuance and interpretation will be up to the courts. And I think the recent judgments I haven't finished reading sort of helped clarify that as well.
Yeah, and I saw the decision as well, Lord Fafanua, and I'm hoping the future candidates that's running for Parliament will read the election law and also within our culture follow these laws.
Yeah, maybe the Parliament in the future might refine the Electoral Act. So there are talks about having like a sliding scale for the amount because what we've seen in the cases is that $5 is the same as 7,000. I have reservations about applying a sliding scale because bribery should be black and white, not a grey area. But there are other ways of addressing people's concerns about that, like the cultural considerations. We can even put in like raise the limit before bribery will be triggered. So different ways of addressing it, but I think it's something that both the Electoral Commission and Parliament will be looking at in the future, and hopefully we might help resolve some of these issues that have come up from the election last year.
Lord Fafanua, that's good news that there's conversations to refine the election law, and no doubt it will benefit the future candidates that's about to run for Parliament in the future. Is there a requirement for a quorum in Parliament?
Well, simple majority.
Okay.
So half the member, if we have half the members in the House, then the House can sit. And that's the same as for Cabinet as well. They need 6 members in Cabinet.
In one of our previous conversations, I know we had a conversation pre-election, and in one of my questions I asked about the criteria that these people or these potential people's representative or candidates need in them before running. And correct me if I'm wrong, but from memory, I think they needed a clean bill of health.
I don't think we require you to have a clean bill of health.
Okay.
But that's something that we think voters should be aware of if they want a capable candidate a member who will not be sick half the time they're representing you, then they will elect someone who has a clean bill of health.
Yeah,
it's in the interest of the voter, even though it might not be specified.
So yeah, Lord Fafanua, and the reason why I'm asking this question is one of the people's representative who was voted in by his area. He's also a cabinet minister chosen by the Prime Minister, but has been sick in New Zealand since becoming a people's representative and also becoming a cabinet minister.
The Prime Minister is given the authority to appoint up to 4 ministers from outside Parliament, and also appoint from the members of Parliament who have been elected into Legislative Assembly, MPs that he wants to be on his cabinet, and that discretion is with the Prime Minister.
What about for somebody to become a parliamentarian or people's representative, to also have it as a criteria to have a clean bill of health before running for Parliament, because as you mentioned, it's a representative government, and this person or this people's rep has not been able to represent his area since becoming a people's rep because he's been sick.
I think that it's sort of like the free market. People should choose responsibly, and they should elect the most capable member of Parliament that they feel should represent them. And I think the clean bill of health is a bit like the level of education as well. So education, health, there's no minimum bar set by legislation. It's left to the voter to decide. And I think that's more democratic than narrowing the pool of candidates. We need to treat the voters as being smart and working in their interest, even though the masses aren't very good at organizing themselves. It's a tricky one, because if you're ill but very popular, why should that stop the people getting who they want to get in?
As you're well aware, Lord Fafanua, we're in orange light restriction with our COVID restriction, and with Parliament. Is there any new setting to the sitting of Parliament or COVID restriction sitting of Parliament?
Yes, we've just ordered 1,000 rat tests for Parliament and masks for the members. The chamber has been changed. We've extended the desks to ensure that there is social distance between the members. The staff are regularly tested, and we already have policy in place for working from home. The committees may be allowed to, we have to look at the policies, but may be allowed to meet online if we're required to social distance. But Parliament as a whole is already a working bubble. We're putting in place barriers in between people's desks in Parliament. So we have, hand sanitizers and things, and the doors and all the regular used places are regularly sanitized and cleaned. So we're doing our best to try and mitigate against the spread of COVID-19. But fortunately, we understand from the government that community transmission numbers are going down and daily infection rates are at a low right now. So hopefully we're on the tail end. But at the same time, Parliament's prepared to put in place COVID measures so that we can continue to do our job, but at the same time be mindful of pandemic that we have to deal with.
Lord Fafanua, with the many press conferences I've attended, one of them, we asked the Prime Minister if the Cabinet needed the help of Parliament to pass any laws, especially with COVID and also the tsunami and the volcano eruption. The answer from the Prime Minister first is no, they don't need any new laws passed yet. And second to that, he's also said no because Parliament needed to meet in Nuku'alofa. And just correct me if that's in the Constitution, is if Parliament needs to meet physically in Nuku'alofa.
I think it's the Constitution. Parliament must meet in Nuku'alofa, and that's why this area where Parliament is in temporary Tofoa was gazetted as Nuku'alofa. It's only in a time of war that the Parliament can meet outside of Nuku'alofa.
Yesterday we got some good news. We got a police commissioner in our country, and it's our first police commissioner from Australia. I've been asking this question in a lot of press conference, and I'm slowly sounding like a broken record asking these questions. And the question is on a anti-corruption commissioner. It will be a good day for Tonga, in my opinion, that we welcome an anti-corruption commissioner, like how we're welcoming a police commissioner from Australia. Your opinion, would Tonga benefit by having an anti-corruption commissioner?
The answer is absolutely. The commissioner, an anti-corruption commissioner, is just another check and balance on the work of government and civil service.
The answer I got a lot from the Attorney General was there was a time where candidates were vetted by the judicial panel, and it was given to the when it was about to be given to the Privy Council for His Majesty to appoint. There was a miscommunication between the judicial panel and government on salary of this position. As Speaker of Parliament, do you have any insight on the progress of the inner workings between government and the judicial panel with this position of anti-corruption commissioner?
I know the issue, but I'm not going to tell you because I think you should ask the Prime Minister what those issues are and how they plan to resolve them. What I do know is that for the past several years, since the Anti-Corruption Commissioner law was passed by Parliament, there has been an allocation and a vote for that office. And I just hope that those issues can be resolved soon by government so that an Anti-Corruption Commissioner can be appointed and the money that's allocated in the budget every year is spent to keep everyone in check.
And Lord Fafanua, it has been indicated by the Prime Minister that the Anti-Corruption Commissioner is in the budget, and there is communication being had with government and the judicial panel. Let's hope it's successful. Thank you, Lord Fafanua, for your time. I know you have a lot of work ahead of you, especially with 4 of the parliamentarians has a verdict of guilty for bribery, and hopefully what was said in this conversation has some insight, some information for the people, not just here in Tonga, but also Tongans abroad.
I think I just want to say that before we sum up, that things are still in limbo until we understand the final outcome. What I want to reassure people is that I'm leaning towards trying to make the schedule so that after that whole process is done, within the legal framework that we have. We don't want people to be victims of the law, but at the same time we recognize that and respect the court and the process and the current decisions and the rights that they've been given by the Constitution. And we have to also understand that the petitioners have a right as well. So right now, the petitions have won their case, and the petition has been heard, and the election that they petition against has been found to be void for some of those cases. So there's always two sides to the coin. And where we see things can be improved, I think we can work on until the next election, and hopefully we can see less misunderstanding, and people can be accustomed to this whole process. And I just hope that doesn't impact the work that the government is doing, and also the Parliament's agenda, because we still have to deliver what we're here to do.
Thank you very much, Lord Fafanua, and for your time again. Thank you very much to everybody that's watching this and listening to it on radio. Like I said earlier when we started with the intro, I'm here with Lord Fafanua, and the conversation we had today was an important one. And what a privilege and honor for me to be able to get time with the Speaker of Parliament and to be able to get information, not just for myself, but for you all watching and listening to this. So before I go, I'm going to have to put on my mask because I'll be walking out into the public road. Off atu, and be good to one another.